Here on.
Okay. So then following the exploration of Scripture and those 4 questions, and again, some weeks it'll take longer than the 40-45 minutes, other weeks it'll take less. Then you move into kind of your response, which is the questions from the meditations, which I'll get to in a second. And then at the very end, this is an opportunity for you as the host. I think this can be kind of a cool thing. And I would do this occasionally when I led this group at my last church, is I would reflect back to the group what I was hearing. You know, examples of God's welcome that I saw take place within the group, or things that I heard from them, or just say, you know, that was an awesome conversation. You know, something to show them that, you know, I'm hearing what's going on, and that, you know, the time was well spent, if that makes sense. So just a way of closing it that sends them out, you know, in a positive way. And then close in prayer. So that's the real nuts and bolts of it in terms of time management. Yeah.
I'm a little bit confused on the 4th one, practicing God's welcome together, questions and meditations. That one alone.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Markers of hospitality we'll come back to. This is something I'm going to skip tonight. So the meditations, in the middle of the book, there's 14 meditations. And this is what this sermon series is going to be based on, these 14 meditations. And it's all...
This is important for Rick and Kathy because they're going to do it.
Right, so bear with me here for just a minute. So you have on the back side of your schedule the sermon schedule. Okay, so those are the meditations that we're doing each week. Now, the very first week, September 8th, there is not a meditation attached to that. It's the passage of Abraham and Sarah at Mamre. But from then on out, the rest are listed right there. And I've combined a couple of them. So the first one is paying attention. The second one is welcoming the stranger within. The third is welcoming the stranger without. And you're going to see there's 2 meditations that deal with welcoming the stranger without. One says the political stranger, one says the theological stranger. The meditations and the questions are more or less the exact same. So that's why I'm combining them. Welcoming new ways, releasing outcomes, embracing that. That's not going to be the title that week, but those are the meditations, just so you know which one we're doing. Saying yes and saying no on October 13th. Empty space on the 20th. Not enough on the 27th. November 3rd is welcoming creation. November 10th is body of outsiders, and they will know us by our love. So I combined two more meditations there. So what these meditations are, I've been working through these actually with staff, and it's just really been an awesome conversation. And these are great for a dinner for 8 because they're short, the scriptures are short, and really they're all about dealing with the questions at the end of the chapter. So what I want to do real quick, based on our study, is go to, let's go to meditation number 3. And that's page 61. And for now, let's skip over the scripture and let's skip over the actual meditation, although if you were leading this, you would want to read the meditation and read the scripture. And let's look at the questions. So the first question is, when was the last time you welcomed someone with different theological or moral views than yours? What happened? And we don't need to answer that now, but that would be one question you could ask to open up conversation around the table. And what you're going to notice is there's kind of a flow to these questions. It usually starts out with more personal questions, and then the focus shifts to the church and how the church is doing with these things. And that can be really good. I would encourage you to explore that, but I would also encourage you to be aware of who's at your table. Because if you have a bunch of people there that are not churchgoers or are not avid churchgoers, they may respond differently to these questions, which could be really helpful, but also knowing what their comfort level is, because they may not want to even mess with that. But the first couple of questions about themselves might be a little bit more interesting. So the way this might work, if you're sitting at a dinner table, is you start out with just reading the scripture. And then you can have either, if it's a short meditation, you could read the whole thing out loud, or you just pick a small portion of the meditation to read out loud that sort of gets the point across. And then you move into the questions, and you spend a few minutes on the questions, whatever ones you think are appropriate. I mean, you can try to work through all of them, or you can just pick a couple, whatever's easiest for you and most comfortable for your group. And so that will have a different feel to it than the Bible study. Bible study is going to be, and discussion group will be a little bit more formal, I guess you would say, comparatively. Whereas when you're sitting around the table, it'll be a little bit more informal. Now, for those of you doing the Bible study, sometimes these meditation questions can be really helpful. So for this particular one we did tonight about the Samaritan woman, the questions underneath Meditations 3 and 4, which are political and theological strangers, can be really helpful to drive and open up the conversation. So what I'd like to do, just so you get a feel for how this works, is I want you at your table to look at and talk about question, let's do the first one and the fourth one.
Are you talking page 63?
Page 63. So take about 5 minutes, okay?
1 and 3.
But the first one, the last time you welcomed someone with different theological views than yours, what happens? I mean, I can think of, I have theological chats or tried to with my brother. Because he left, we were baptized Catholic and he left the church when my mom died suddenly. He was 18. And so he like got into there for him. And so I still, I mean, you know, if he comes to visit me, I usually have like my modern, like my contemporary Christian music going on the Sonos over it. Oh my gosh, could you turn your Jesus music off for a bit? You know what I mean? It's just, and then in the and he comes. I am meeting resistance constantly, and I say, and I'm always like, you know, the God that you recall from your early Catholic years is not the God that you would come to know and love as an adult. He is not an angry God. He did not take your mother away from you. He did, you know, your mother chose. Our mother chose not to go to the ER when she had meningitis. She swore it was the flu and saying, you know what I mean? So I just, you know, I go back into God's grace and His love and whatever, and it's just it's a constant thing that we've had because, you know, my greatest desire is to have him back to the church instead he's one of these, he's 8 years younger, so he's younger than, you know, a decade younger. He's one of these, you know, he's not the millennial, he's the generation after, you know, ahead of the millennial, but he's one of these folks that, you know, that thinks organized religion is evil, you know, that you're out there to judge and and there are some of those folks, and sadly you see some of those folks in the media and on TV, there's a lot of them, and those are the publicized ones. And so it's just, you know, I always have this, you know, and, you know, God opened a door last year when my brother and now wife asked me to marry them at their wedding, right? So, you know, that I told them, it was back and forth, and it was just, you know, well, you know, you can't be without God. I said, well, then I can't figure what, you know what I mean? And so then eventually I did, they agreed on me bringing in like 3 or 4 scripture verses or whatever, just to kind of tie him to, hey, this is how you walk and how you serve in life. This is what God calls you to do. Like just to get him to dip his toes in the water. And but it's a constant. Yeah. Yeah, he never went to therapy after that. Still, yeah. Yeah.
But we have to be able to accept that I have friends who are
Credit where credit's due. Yeah.
Sometimes the way it is all food though. I mean, we're blessed because we work hard, right? You know, we always take claim. That's human nature.
Right.
We're all the selfish nature.
Another one just experience just with our friends who were both very involved.
I have 2 friends that I exercise with, and I know one is that, I know the other, and I like to say, we have fights over politics. I love them together. That was
hard, but I mean,
Your neighbors
you
must
know,
say. A lot of people.
we live in a fallen world, and humanity, whether you're a priest or not, you're human.
Mm-hmm.
And they call to sin just as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And we're also in a society that celebrates the malicious and evil, and people are inundated constantly. I think that one of the reasons that people feel religion is so difficult is often the way it's being portrayed.
yes.
Somebody who's on a tangent, one way or another.
And my experiences, I
Polite, listen and try to pick out something that you
really
agree with.
enjoy
And the things that
getting
you
into
constantly argue
conversations
over, you say,
with
I'm not
people
gonna
that
go
hear
there,
it.
because it's only a
The
short
problem is, I much prefer to talk to somebody with different beliefs than I do,
Because
because they have a
talk
different
to
perspective.
somebody.
Everything I do is the same as
We
you.
won't send you to the well. Okay, we won't send you there to talk
No,
to the
no,
lady.
not tonight.
And that
You got enough?
We got.
partly goes back to grad school where
Look beyond.
Israel melted pot of everybody.
That's right. You don't accuse and.
Christians, Jews, Muslim, Sikh.
About something that could be.
All right, once again, I'm sorry to interrupt conversation, but I'm going to draw us back in if I could. First of all, how'd it go?
Good, but we never got question one.
Well, and there's a lesson there, right?
Yeah.
Nobody was
So-
watching the clock.
Part of the reason we do this is to give you a feel for how it might go when you're doing it. So
Yeah.
you notice here, 5 minutes you spend on all in one question, and that's fine. So that that tells you a little bit about how to prepare. So how did having questions like this to talk about, to think about, maybe drive home what was happening in the scripture passage, or at least help you be able to connect it more to your life today?
Well, I feel like God's word is always applicable. And, you go there between the Samaritan and the Jew, and here we went for the, Christian versus the agnostic. So, you can apply God's word.
I think it's just, I think it's a big part we have to apply to our life, and this is what it's doing.
We all talked about maybe some of our shortcomings of tolerance in situations that you are real life examples, right?
Pushing your button.
Yeah, pushing a button thing, yeah.
And think about that, because you're experiencing God's welcome at your table. Being able to share those things in a day and age where sharing those types of things potentially could be, well, not popular. It's putting yourself out there to be shamed, to be judged, all of that. The fact that you're not, you're experiencing God's welcome. You're experiencing very much what the Samaritan woman experienced at the well. Anything else on that? Okay. So, going back to the flow, does that make sense, what we're kind of looking at in terms of what the structure of the Bible study would look like? Are there any questions on that? I want to make sure that we're clear. All right, so for those of you doing the dinners for 8 or dinners for 10, how did that flow with the meditation sound to you?
Our dinners for 8 meet about once every 3 months. We've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. And we already have a person in our group who has said pretty outright, they don't do Bible studies. They don't do
And they don't
book
wanna do
club.
this. I asked.
So how do you...
So I don't, we haven't figured out what we're gonna do yet.
Well, and it may be that she's kind of like this woman in the sense that, she sees what it is and she's automatically offering the judgment. And yet when she actually experiences it, maybe it'll be different.
And the question is the meditations really a Bible study?
Yeah, it's a little different. You're right.
It's a reading of scripture, it's some thoughts on it, and then some life application questions, so it's a little, it's a different, it's not really a Bible study.
Well, I'm just gonna say this, I don't think our group is gonna be willing to meet this
It
often.
doesn't sound like they'll...
It isn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
No, I know, that's, maybe you'll just do, you'll have to work it out with your group.
Yeah. I would say, if you guys get one, that's great.
Pick a couple.
You gotta,
Just take some of them and do
Yeah.
it.
yeah,
Okay.
that's what I would do. I wouldn't worry about trying to get all of them done, especially if your group doesn't meet that often.
It doesn't,
Again, that's a form of hospitality, is recognizing the needs of your group
we
and
can hardly.
meeting them.
Order.
So, yeah, John.
A meditation is a reflection of one life.
Yep.
And if we approach it from that perspective, perhaps.
Yep.
it will be easy.
And remember, hospitality is sort of a risk. It's one you got to be ready to take, but it's a risk because you're putting yourself out there at the risk of rejection, for example. And but at the same time, there could also be this acceptance and this experience of, abundant life. So, don't be afraid to take a risk. That's one of the markers of hospitality, which we'll talk about in week 1. And part of that is, again, recognizing the needs of the group and saying, okay, what is an acceptable risk here to take?
Well, I guess the question I'm thinking is the people that are in our dinner for 8, if they really would rather, because you're saying, well, then maybe we should only do 2 or 3. Maybe if they're more interested, they would rather do the whole thing.
And they might, yeah.
And so I think we probably should offer them either way.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay.
All right. Keep us moving here. So, here's what I'm looking at as outcomes for this. So this is mainly for you as facilitators, so you know what we're working towards, okay? So one outcome, number 1, is recognize the difference between friendliness and welcoming, okay? I hear a lot of churches say, we are a friendly church. And when I dive into them, that's exactly what they are. Friendliness speaks to a way we react to people when they come in the door. Welcoming speaks to a state of being that people can, for lack of a better word, expect when they come in the door. And where welcoming really comes into play, where it really is more difficult, is when it's people that are different than us that come in our door. Okay, this last Sunday we had a Tanzanian family come to our church. And from what I could tell, we did a great job welcoming them. They seemed to feel very good about things. We got a card, with their information on it and all of that. So that's a good first step of welcoming. It's easy to welcome people that are just like we are. It comes naturally. And that's why we end up falling into this trap of friendliness, because we're not sure how to welcome somebody who's different, because we don't want to offend them. We don't want to, send them away or make them think bad things about our church. But that's, again, why the welcoming piece is a risk. And we'll, again, week 1, talk about, how do we prepare ourselves for someone different coming in. If we had more time, I'd go through that tonight, but we don't. So another outcome is be able to describe gospel hospitality in your own life. So be able to talk about your experiences of gospel hospitality, whether you shared it or you've experienced it. Another outcome, be able to show gospel hospitality to others. So not only do you understand what it is in your own life, but you also can start sharing it with others so they experience it. Does that make sense so far? Okay. And then the last one, and this is for those of you who are leaders in the church, and this is a big reason I wanted to do this, is to be able to assess how welcoming our church is. So kind of keep your eyes and ears open as we work through this. And at the end, I may be asking those of you who are leaders, how welcoming would you say we are based on your understanding of God's welcome? And that'll give us some indication of how we need to move forward. Because the reality is most churches really, really, really struggle with this. They're good at the friendly thing, but they don't know how to be welcoming. And that's one of my main hopes for Southminster or any church I serve, is that we can learn to be a welcoming congregation, whatever that looks like for us. So this will be a good way for us to assess that. Some other stuff for you to be aware of: turquoise table. The turquoise table is going to be sort of the practical side of this. You see one out here in the narthex. There's going to be one in the front of the sanctuary. There's also one outside here. And we're going to be using that as a way to show what gospel hospitality looks like throughout the series in different ways. So you can kind of look forward to that. If you'd like to know more, you can read the book. You'll be hearing her story in week 1. It's actually a really cool story. The other thing I want to send you to, if you're interested, is rummaging through the covers. This will give you a better idea of why this is a passion for me, first and foremost, but also, gives you more insight into hospitality. The first one is the blog that I do, and then the second one is the podcast. And you can find it here at this website. You can go to iTunes or Spotify, either one, and find it there too.
Are those on our church website?
Not yet. We're working on it. Right now, our website is not working, so if you go to our
I was
website,
gonna tell you
it's
down.
not there. Yeah.
I'm guessing it's the DNS thing, like you
No.
haven't paid GoDaddy, no?
It's not
that?
GoDaddy that we haven't paid. It's the host, which is
Ah.
different. And we've been trying. It's a long story. We're working
We
on it.
need
Hopefully,
that
the next.
electronic.
What's that?
We need to get that payment electronic so we won't have to worry.
Well,
about
we're
this.
not going to be paying her much longer because we're moving to a new host. So
Ah.
that's part of the issue.
Okay.
Again, long story that we don't have time for here, and if I start telling it, I'm going to be very inhospitable. So
Yeah.
let's not go there. All right, so we talked a little bit about schedule, time management, preparation. I would say the big thing is to make sure that you're reading the book, that you're keeping up on the scriptures that you're teaching, you're reading the meditations. All of those things can really enhance your experience as a facilitator. And it makes you that much more prepared because, like I said earlier, you need to be the most prepared person in the room. Because you can't expect people coming in to be. So they're going to look to you to kind of lead them. So no big shock there. Let's see. All right. So at the end of your time each week, I think it's important to send people the right way. I've always felt that. And so one of the things you can do is, again, do a recap of the meditations. At the very end of God's welcome, if you really are ambitious, and you can read about this in the book, you can do a welcome feast. That might be a good way to end your time together. And again, this would be at the very end of the series. One of the things I would really encourage you to do, and encourage you to encourage your teams or your groups to do, is a welcome journal. Write down, even if it's just a sentence, every time or the majority of the times or whatever, when you experience God's welcome in your life. Because that really gets you thinking about it, and it becomes a more intentional thing that you're paying attention to. And it really does start to shift your priority or shift your perceptions and your priorities. And then in your book, there's something called Monday Morning Connections. And that can be really helpful too. And let me get you a description of that. Where'd it go?
It's in the back.
Yeah, that's what I thought. There it is. Yeah, Monday Morning Connections. It's how do you share God's welcome through your weekly activities like at school, work, home, etc. So challenging them to think about how can they show God's welcome in their day-to-day life as you send them away is another good thing. These two bottom ones I think would be the two that I would most encourage.
143.
Um,
Oh, thank you.
The welcome feast, if this is something that you decide you would like to do, let Kathy and I know, and we might be able to help you get that done. But read about it in the book first. Again, that's in the very back as well, and decide if it's something that fits what you're doing. Any questions on any of that? Yes, John.
I have 2 questions regarding logistics.
Yeah.
It's going to be done in this room here.
Some of them will be. Are all of them in this room, Kathy?
No, they're not.
I didn't think so.
Jen's gonna have hers in
My
her
house.
home.
Nice.
Jim and Keith are having the Barnabas from the men's group at
Nice.
7:30. And who else is having the chapel? I have all.
I'm in the chapel. I know that.
You're in the chapel, and so is Todd. Todd is in the chapel. So we have 2 in the chapel, one in Jen's home and one in the Barnabas
Okay.
room.
Yeah, so we're kind of all
Okay.
over, John.
Yeah.
Because one of the logistical problems is, especially if it's going to be between services.
And adult ed is different, that's separate. Talking adult ed between services,
Yeah.
there's gonna be 4 tables in here for them.
Yeah, that'll be different, John, than what we're talking. I mean, I think the adult ed is still going to use the Bible study, but again, that's Sunday morning. The rest of these are going to be during the week. Yeah. The big thing, just real quick on that, you do bring up a good point. Depending on when you're meeting, be aware of who else is meeting in the building. And just make sure as you're coming and going, doors are locked. Unfortunately, we live in a world now where we got to keep our doors locked, even though we're the church. The other thing is, like, for me on Thursdays, actually this will be after PDO's now. I was going to say, if PDO's meeting here, then we need to be real careful about that, but I don't know if any of you are going to run into that. So I think the groups that meet in the
Your
morning,
afternoon and Todd's evening.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Our morning groups don't meet here, so we should be all right. Any other questions on that?
Can I just ask, I mean,
Please.
where are we marketing any of this? Because we've mentioned outside people, but I couldn't see if it was on our website, and, I mean, is there anything going out on social
So
media?
here's, the original plan was to get stuff out. We were going to do a marketing campaign on social media and using our website. Maureen resigned. So now, that's not a whole long story. But, and not her, but just what we're trying to get figured out. And so right now we weren't really able to execute that marketing plan very well. So we are getting stuff out now through the e-blast. It was on the website. And I believe it's out on Twitter, but
Better make sure it's on Facebook.
well, that's one of the spaces where we're stuck right now. So we're working on it.
We have an Instagram account?
Yeah, we're stuck there too. So I'm going to see. I have my own accounts for both of those, so I'll see if I can't get it out that way. That may be the best way.
But this is more in the community, right? Not so much for people from the community?
Well, initially the marketing campaign was to try to reach the community.
Okay.
That was sort of the idea. But to be perfectly honest with you, the way the meditations especially are set up, it's probably going to be more beneficial for us as the church. The Bible studies and discussion groups will go, beneficial for everybody. So, yeah, what I would say right now, our best bet to get word out is word of mouth.
And it doesn't hurt if you invite people to your group.
Yeah.
You can get a little card here, I'm meeting on Thursday night, invite people, a personal invite.
Yeah, personal invites, and that's always been the most effective way. So I would highly encourage that. And
Emails,
again,
whatever.
we'll try to get stuff out through our other means, but I suspect that's going to be a little hit and miss due to the current circumstances. So that is a very, very good question, Jen.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So this is what I want to close with. Back in the early days of the church, this idea of hospitality and Jesus as the incarnation, it was one that people had a hard time getting their heads around. So not all that different than today. Partly because how do you get your heads around someone who is promising to bring you into God's own life, whatever that looks like? How do you get your head around the idea that Jesus is both 100% human, 100% God? And then maybe most profoundly for our culture, how do you get your head around the fact that someone is offering you something with no strings attached? And that's the bottom line when we talk about gospel hospitality, is it's something that we as the church, we as individual Christians offer, not expecting anything in return. That's a very hard concept